Hi everybody, welcome to another video. So for today's video I'm going to be talking about the list of films that I think are the best films about farm animals and pets. And the reason why I've decided to do this video is because, as some of you may already know from my social media and from my wife's social media, that we've both got hens in our back garden now, and we've got 4 of them in total, and they seem like they're settling in okay. And when we were setting everything up and getting things sorted, it kind of inspired me to make this video. I'm not going to say animals in its entirety, because you could go from animals in the jungle, animals in the ocean, or prehistoric animals, so where films like Jurassic Park, Jaws and The Jungle Book might be included, but I'm not going to, so I'm just going to focus primarily on farm animals and pets. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is listing the films ranked from 10 all the way down to 1 that I feel represent animal groups on farms and as pets, either the most authentic way or in the most creative. So let's get started. Number 10. Stuart Little. This is a film I absolutely loved watching when I was a kid. So it's based on E.B. White's novel of the same name, published in 1945. It tells the story of a young mouse who's in an orphanage, who is adopted by a human family and is taken back home, where he meets the family pet and he meets a variety of other characters. Just the fact that he lives in an orphanage already humanises Stuart, not just as a mouse, but with human-like characteristics, because he speaks to the humans and he interacts with them like any normal child would, unlike the cats, which is a bit weird. And you find this out in the sequels, that he goes to school and he drives a car and he does a lot of different things that relate to what children and adults would do normally, but he's just a small mouse. But in terms of themes, Stuart Little focuses primarily on acceptance as different and the choice to adopt, but uses the fact that he's a different species. The use of the film's humour is quite creative as well, in terms of the cat versus mouse rivalry, where it's interesting because this time the mouse is the superior one, where the mouse is the master and the cat is the pet.
A mouse with a pet cat.
So it exaggerates the relationship between cats and mice, but it also accurately depicts them. There's a love-hate relationship, especially through the character of Snowbell, where he first hates Stuart for stealing his spot almost, but then he gradually accepts him into the family at the expense of him turning against his fellow cats and his friends. I think what was special about the 90s and releasing films about animals was that because it was the characters who reminded the audience of pets that they had when they were growing up. For example, Smokey, the main villain in the film, he reminds me of my old cat Tommy from years ago, because he was a similar breed of cat and he hated mice, he was evil towards them, and he was quite elusive from us as well. So I think that's what's special about something like Stuart Little, because the animals kind of relate to the animals that we grew up with or we live with now, but it also exaggerates them, what they could be thinking and how they behave. So Stuart Little then, it was a commercial success and a critical success, and it did follow up with 2 sequels. First one was in 2002, which was live action, and the second one was in 2006, which was animated. So let's move on to number 9. Babe. To be fair, I couldn't not include this, because with most people, when they think of films about animals, the first film that comes to mind is Babe. So it's based on the children's novel The Sheep Pig by Dick King-Smith. Babe is a domestic piglet who is won at a county fair by farmer Arthur Hoggett, and is brought back to the barn, where he encounters various different characters, including Fly, who's a female border collie, Rex, the lead sheepdog, Ferdinand, a white Indian runner duck, and Ma, an old sheep on the farm. It has a simple narrative that goes into farm life from various different perspectives of different animals. The anthropomorphic relationships between the characters establish those characterizations, and therefore the relationships. And not just the characterizations, the amount of animals they use for the film as well. I think they used about 48 pigs just for the Babe character. But when you watch it, you feel a sense of warmth, you feel a sense of inspiration, and it just makes you smile. In whatever mood you're in, if you just put it on the telly, it'll always just make you smile. I wouldn't be surprised actually if it raised the number of vegetarians after the film came out as well, because we were so engrossed in that kind of relationship with that character on screen, and also the other ones as well. But even so, it was a very well received film. It was a commercial success, and it was a critical success as well. It was nominated for 7 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Cromwell, Best Screenplay, and Best Visual Effects. And I think a film that was trying to depict farm life and its animals, Babe depicted it really, really well, in an exaggerated way where the animals could talk and they had their own humanised characterizations, but it also depicted it quite accurately at the same time. So Babe is an absolutely delightful film, it really is. I might actually watch it after filming this video again, because I haven't seen it for years. So, number 8. 101 Dalmatians. It's interesting because in the 1960s, 101 Dalmatians came out when Disney was still releasing fantasy stories of heroes and villains and fictional fairies and magic and all of those things. 101 Dalmatians takes a different route because it follows the modern world. Like, it's set in London by Regent's Park at the beginning of the film, but they just exaggerate it to blend in with the story of the Dalmatians. So it's an adventure story about Dalmatians, where two dog owners, Roger and Anita, have their own two dogs, Pongo and Purdy, who have 15 puppies, but they entice the interest of Cruella de Vil, who's actually a childhood friend of Anita, and she ends up hiring henchmen Horace and Jasper to kidnap the dogs and turn their fur into a coat. It sounds quite sadistic when you say it like that, but the fact that the story follows these dogs, not just Dalmatians, but various different ones, especially in the Twilight Bark sequence where they communicate a chain almost to try and track down the Dalmatians, but they'd find that it's not just 15 Dalmatians that have been kidnapped from Anita and Roger's home, but 99 in total just for Cruella's coat. You do see other dogs in the film subtly, including ones who look just like Jock, Lady and Tramp from the 1950s film Lady and the Tramp during that sequence. But other than dogs, you do experience other characters, including Captain the Horse and Tibbs the Cat, who help them find their way back home and hide from Horace and Jasper and Cruella. And I bet after the film came out, people wanted to buy Dalmatians, even more so from after the 1996 remake. That film practically depicts the same story, but with Home Alone-like adjustments to it, and it has a terrific ensemble cast, including Glenn Close as Cruella, Jeff Daniels as Roger, Jolie Richardson as Anita, Hugh Laurie as Jasper, and Mark Williams as Horace. But even that film had to use real dogs as part of the story, where they had to train them while also implementing visual effects and CGI. So 101 Dalmatians, I think both films are very, very good. Moving on to number 7. Up. The reason why I've chosen this one is because even though it doesn't directly address animals as the central plot device, I think the use of animals in the film was quite clever. I'm talking about, of course, the dogs. It's particularly Doug, who we grow fondly of. He's a golden retriever who's anthropomorphic, who's able to speak to Carl, Russell and Charles Muntz, just like the other dogs are. But interestingly and creatively, it's actually through his collar where his thoughts are transmitted into speech through that device.
Speak!
Hi there.
Did that dog just say hi there?
Oh, yes.
Bruh!
My name is Doug. I have just met you, and I love you. My master.
It establishes a sense of humanity on Doug's part, but I just think for Pixar to take that direction of dogs communicating, not necessarily through speech in their mouths, but through their collar and their thoughts, was very creative. I also love the fact that the three dogs, Alpha, Beta and Gamma, are all based on the 3 types of radiation. And I think that, from an audience perspective, would be both a dream and a nightmare, because you know what the dogs are thinking, but at the same time, they drive you mad. But regardless, Doug and the other dogs are probably Pixar's most creative, yet simplest characters that they've ever created. So, moving on. Shaun the Sheep the movie and a Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon. Right, the reason why I've chosen to include both films in this is because, to be honest, I find them both equally as brilliant as each other. I can't choose which one is better because they're both brilliant in different ways. Unlike most in this video, there's no actual dialogue between the characters. They only make the sounds that they would normally make in real life. Even the farmer doesn't speak, so it's his body language that we follow to make us understand that character, as well as the sheep and the dog, etc. So in some respect, you could argue that they're actually silent films. We were first introduced to Shaun the Sheep in the Wallace Gromit short, A Close Shave, and since then he's had his own TV series. But after a couple of years, we've finally had films. The first film focuses primarily on farm life with an exaggerated story where Shaun and the flock end up going on their own little adventure when things go wrong with the farmer. Whereas Farmageddon, as you can tell from the title, has that aspect of the story in it, but it has a little science fiction twist. I think what's so clever about the entire Shaun the Sheep series anyway, as well as the 2 films, is it's so simple, but it's so genius at the same time. And I think because of the simple humour and the fact that it's a celebration almost of British culture, that we kind of find that even more funny because it takes the mick out of the British culture and the British people and the British animals that live within the UK, and it's something we can just appreciate a lot more. So out of Shaun the Sheep movie and Farmageddon, I personally can't choose which one's better of the 2. So let me know in the comments what you think. So next one, let's move on. Lady and the Tramp. So like I mentioned earlier about 101 Dalmatians, Lady and the Tramp was a film released at the time where there are predominantly princes, princesses, fictional worlds and magic involved. But this one stands out just like 101 Dalmatians did, as it's set in the modern world. This one focuses on dogs, but it's more about the romantic relationship between Lady, a cocker spaniel, and Tramp, a mutt. And just the names of them already establish the kind of social group that they live among. So Lady and Tramp, they're both humanised, very much so, like every animal that I've talked about in this video. But the fact that there are still exaggerated moments, such as the famous spaghetti scene outside the back of a restaurant. But from a film point of view, I think Lady and the Tramp is one of those that I find is probably underrated as far as the list of Disney films are concerned, because while you don't necessarily have to have magic literally in front of your eyes like most Disney films have, it establishes that other sense of magic within the real world. And I think that's what's really nice to see when you have a film about that exaggerates the ways dogs behave, but also captures that sense of warmth as to why we love dogs so much and have them as pets. But that's also had a remake as well, which was released last year just on Disney+. And I think with that remake as well, I do really enjoy it. In fact, in 2019, because there were 4 Disney remakes, I would probably say Lady and the Tramp was the best one. It wasn't trying to glorify its original film, but because it wasn't as popular, I think it was something that didn't try too hard. That's why I really like the live action film of Lady and the Tramp. So if you haven't seen it, watch it on Disney+, and it's only there. So number 4. Chicken Run. I'd probably go as far as to say that this is probably the greatest film about farm animals ever. It's timeless, the humour is genius, and the characterizations are really clever as well. There are other reasons why I've chosen other films above Chicken Run in this case. It's set in 1950s Britain, where we follow a flock of chickens who are devising plots in order to escape from their farm owners, Mr. and Mrs. Tweedy. There's also a montage during the opening credits where we see their failed attempts. So the film starts going from chickens laying eggs to them being killed because they can't lay any eggs, to all of them becoming the meat for chicken pies based on primarily Mrs. Tweedy's greed for money.
Chickens go in, pies come out.
So in many ways the film goes down a two-way road between the normal life of a chicken, which one aspect is laying eggs and the other is where they are used as meat for pies and other sources of food. And this is something that's quite accurate, but it's depicted for the film in a very scary way, or sometimes even hysterical way at the same time, such as the quotes that they use.
I don't want to be a pie. I don't like gravy.
And I think what's good about Chicken Run as well is it echoes references to popular culture and wartime, especially Fowler, who talks about his RAF days, and Rocky, who claims to be American, mainly because he's voiced by an American actor, Mel Gibson. Like with Fowler, it's an ongoing gag where he references RAF, where the audience are kind of establishing that belief that he was a pilot in the RAF. But it turned out he was just a mascot. But to even get to that status where he was a mascot in the RAF among humans, it was almost like he had achieved that RAF Day status because of that experience. But even so, the use of the humour in Chicken Run is just brilliant. And I think when it comes to chickens, everyone thinks Ginger, Bunty, Babs, Mac, all those different kind of chickens. Oh, Edwina. You learn more about hens, but at the same time, they exaggerate it because of those characterizations. So Chicken Run, the first Aardman feature film. I can't believe it was released 20 years ago. There's a sequel coming out soon after the coronavirus pandemic has eventually calmed down. I think it's probably one of my absolute favourite stop motion films ever. So number 3. Wallace and Gromit. Controversially, in some way, I've picked the film Curse of the Were-Rabbit above Chicken Run, and there's a reason why I've chosen to do this, is because it focuses more on various different animals within a human-like setting. So you've got Wallace, who's an inventor, and you've got his dog, Gromit. I'd go as far as to say with Gromit, actually, that he's probably the most expressive mute character of all time. People talk about R2-D2, who just makes bleeping sounds, but Gromit is so expressive in his body language and his mannerisms that makes us understand him, that humanises his nature. They exaggerate what he can do as a dog, but because he doesn't speak, we still follow the fact that he's a dog who has an owner. A bit like Bitzer in Shaun the Sheep. We were already introduced to animals in the Wallace and Gromit series through, of course, Mr. Shaun the Sheep, Feathers McCraw in The Wrong Trousers, and Preston in A Close Shave. But this film's entire story follows rabbits and their lifestyle in the wild and the human response to that. It's essentially a parody mystery story, but unlike Chicken Run and like Shaun the Sheep, the animals don't speak. Some rabbits are used as pets, as Wallace showed, while others actually go beyond their normalities in the forms of the were-rabbit itself and Hutch, both of which have essences of Wallace in them, where the former is Wallace himself and the latter is a secondary existence of Wallace with traits of his personality, including his love and fascination with cheese.
Oh, I do like a bit of gorgonzola.
And of course, Hutch was also voiced by the late Peter Sallis. What's nice about The Curse of the Were-Rabbit is that it follows the same kind of humour as Chicken Run did, of course by Aardman Animations, same as Shaun the Sheep, but it also has a unique twist where it's a mystery story, a fantasy element to it as well. As a huge fan of Wallace and Gromit, I'm glad they made the film. The film is an absolutely timeless classic, just like Chicken Run. So, number 2. Warhorse. Right, before anyone comments and said that this one's very different, it is different, but there's a reason why I've included it. First of all, it's definitely not a kids film, unlike pretty much every other film I've mentioned in this video. So we follow an animal in a way that we've never ever followed animals before in films, where it takes war from a totally different angle, but more from the pure innocent, which are of course the horses. So based on the novel of the same name, Warhorse is set in countryside Devon, where a farming family buy a thoroughbred called Joey. He builds a special bond with the family's teenage son, Albert, but soon after Joey is sold to the British Army for the First World War, and it's from then on where we follow Joey's journey throughout war, where he experiences trauma, heartbreak, but he also shows a sense of bravery. So we see in the film that it's primarily used for slave labour, where he is used to carry cannons and carts, but also used in combat. To entice that characterisation a lot more, he meets another horse called Topthorn, who experiences it with him. Topthorn's involvement doesn't go just about them two, it goes beyond them, what every other horse was probably feeling during that difficult time. You could also say that the horses are like other soldiers, but of course they're involved in a war that they did create and have been forced to get involved in because of their physical attributes. For those who've seen the film will probably feel that events that happen exaggerate what would have happened in real life, but it's good that they made this because it's a film that talks more about the unspoken heroes and the most innocent victims of the First World War. Every film, every memoir, every novel, every play about wartime focuses from a human perspective, but this time it does it from a horse's. If you're a big animal lover, it's probably not for the faint-hearted, but with the likes of Spielberg directing it and Kathleen Kennedy as producer and John Williams with the absolutely breathtaking score, it makes the film easier to watch because you know there's a sense of adventure, there's a sense of hope, and also there's moments of tragedy and heartbreak, which is what Spielberg is primarily known for from other films that he's done in the past. So Warhorse, it's a film that's definitely worth seeing, and the stage adaptation is brilliant as well. I've never read the novel actually, but I will definitely now. So last but not least, number 1, what is the best film about farm animals and pets? Let's find out. Ratatouille. So the reason why I've chosen this as my number 1 film about animals, from Pixar's point of view, it's probably the most mature film that they've ever made. It deals with themes that are more towards adults than towards kids, I feel. So Ratatouille follows the story of Remy, a rat who has aspirations to become a cook, and we know who his hero is Auguste Gusteau. The film follows Remy's path into becoming a chef, while also depicting the realities of being a rat whilst among humans. It kind of shows the realities of what a rat goes through every day. It's interesting because it turns it on itself this time. Instead of it being about rats and their ravaging appetite, it focuses on one particular rat who turns it around, where he wants to become a cook and learn how to cook and become famous and all those things. What I feel with Ratatouille is that it's a film about rats where there's some kind of socio-political themes surrounding it. You can be who you want to be, no matter what background you come from, and as Anton Ego says,
not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere.
Probably one of my favourite quotes of all time. And it's funny actually, because from a personal perspective, I absolutely hate rats. Out of every other animal in the world, they are probably my biggest phobia. It's ironic that it's actually my favourite film that features a story about farm animals and pets, and as well, for me at least, being probably the most inspirational film I've probably ever watched. So Ratatouille depicts what rats go through. It exaggerates what they are capable of. So Ratatouille is probably one of the best Pixar films I think ever. It celebrates the French culture as well. So that rounds up this video then about the films that I think are the best about farm animals and pets. So what do you think is the best film about farm animals or pets? Let me know in the comments what you think. Be sure to like the video if you've enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. See ya.